just about ready to get started whenever you are. You can go ahead.
I am ready. Let me go ahead and start. Perfect. Thank you. All right. Let me go ahead and, can you put me as co-host so I can share screen? And should I wait to share screen?
Yeah, if you could.
Okay. Whoop.
Okay, you should be able to share now, but yeah.
Wonderful.
Do you want to open us in prayer and then I'll kind of intro us?
Definitely. Thank you all for coming today. I'm going to go ahead and open in prayer. God, thank you so much for today and just bringing us all together for many sentimental and deeper reasons that burnout can bring and the significance of today. Continue to guide us in our conversations and in what we can do and bring and take away for ourselves in self-compassion and care. In Jesus' name I pray, amen.
Thank you. So I'm just going to kind of intro us for now. Tina and I talked a lot about this training and whether to move it because February is Black History Month. And we were considering moving the focus of this meeting to that. But Tina got some feedback that might not be the most beneficial thing, that it is kind of a controversial topic, whether to have a special month for that or if it should just be integrated. And the fact that we even need to have that discussion is kind of sad. So we kept talking about it. We considered a lot of different options, but we didn't want to add work to Black folks' lives when we were supposedly honoring them. That felt like a burden. And we also didn't feel comfortable speaking ourselves because we're not Black. And it's not our experience. We're not experts on that. So we talked about the different possibilities we thought of. We were still uncertain, but we felt sharing our process about that was going to be valuable. And we kept the original Burnout training because it serves communities, including Black communities. And if we can learn this material and share it with our clients and support those who are suffering burnout from oppression, because we know that Black communities in particular face more stresses systematically and institutionally and just interpersonally than pretty much any other group in this country. So we felt that it was still important and useful. We know burnout is in our culture in general. Some roots are racially bound and dig far back into ugly parts of our country's history, but we're hoping that this can help us start digging into what that is. Let's look at what systematically forces us into this, as well as what personally we can do about it to help root out the oppression that leads to burnout, and to make room for rest and joy and serving our communities of color by doing that. So we're walking into this training with as much humility as we can. We're not Black. Our experiences are very different. Our words are going to be cast through our own cultural lenses, but we hope the information is still of benefit. We know we're going to make mistakes and oversights because of our own limitations. But we remember that Black History Month celebrates what has been overcome and achieved by Black people. It should also celebrate joy and rest. And that is something that is often forgotten. To move forward, we need not just striving and strength and power to do things, but also rest, time to regenerate. And there's not really a life worth living that doesn't include joy and enjoyment as well. So I want to read a tweet from a man named Ryan Ken. He's an actor and a podcaster. He says, "I don't believe that my ancestors' dream for me was to be the hardest worker. They desired rest and to labor for their own benefit. I'm reflecting on how generational exhaustion is even reflected in humor. How many of Black parents be like jokes are portraits of exhaustion." And I'll also read a note from the NAP Ministry, which is an organization that examines the liberating power of naps and believes rest is a form of resistance and reparations. And they say, "A love note to Black folks. You don't have to keep trying so hard. You are enough now, without any extra labor. You are divine. You can rest." And today is also Ash Wednesday, when we ask for forgiveness for the sins of our past, and we look forward to Easter, to being saved from oppression and death. We are all guilty of supporting and reinforcing a society that conflates success with accomplishments, busyness with importance, and productivity with goodness. May we all burn away these sins so we don't keep burning out. And with that, I think we're going to get started. So Tina can share the slides.
Thank you so much, Annie. That was beautiful. All right.
And while we're doing this, go ahead and put questions into, there is a Q&A feature. So we can try using that and let us know your questions, and we'll hopefully have time for at the end for answering those.
Very good. And when Annie and I were putting this together, one of the things that we started doing was actually last year, Annie put me on this book while we were resting at Lazy Z because we were experiencing burnout. So this is something that's very personal, even for both of us in the last year of what we were working on overcoming. So today's agenda is going to cover 4 basic areas: burnout itself, closing the stress cycle, blocks to recovery, and burnout prevention techniques. First one is what is burnout? Basically, the biggest 3 things that components of burnout is emotional exhaustion, expectations of ourselves and expectations we think others have on us, depersonalization, and decreased sense of accomplishment. The emotionally stuck feeling is right in that emotional exhaustion place. Depersonalization is when we can just feel like we're on autopilot and we get this mental numbing. We almost feel like we're in a little bit of a brain fog. This I've heard a lot during our COVID times, and just going blank, not being able to recall simple information that we normally do. And just having that decreased sense of accomplishment, like just a hamster wheel, just spinning our wheels and not sure if we're making a difference. Those are all components of burnout.
And so taking a look at the stress cycle, it's emphasized that stress is a process. It has a beginning, a middle, and an end. And a lot of times we get stuck in that middle, in that process that is actively still reacting to whatever was going on. And it's not just something that ends by itself necessarily. Our systems are trained to look out for threats. And so if our system is still like, oh, there's still a threat, it's still going to be reacting to that threat. And so we start at the beginning with this trigger or stimulus of some kind. It could be a person, place, or things, any situation that causes that reaction in our nervous system. And then we're in that reaction mode. We're either fleeing or fighting or shutting down and freeze. And to end that, we kind of need to speak our body's language to signal that it's okay now, that we're safe now. So emotional stuckness is that everyday exhaustion, that same stressor that you're stuck with. And you not only can't, sometimes we can't do anything about the stressor, but we can do something about the stress. So if you can go to the next slide, I'm going to talk more about what the difference between a stressor and the stress is. This is a really important distinction. I know we all know this, but we don't necessarily think about it in such clear terms. And so I think it's really helpful, especially explaining to clients, the stressor is whatever that trigger is, whatever that event, the object, person, environment, thought, whatever that is, it's considered demanding, challenging, or threatening. It's whatever our nervous system is like, okay, something bad might happen. And so we react. So that's the beginning. We react to that stress. And then the stress itself is what our body does in reaction to that trigger. And so it's including the mind, body, and emotions. I think a lot of us know these neurological processes that happen. And this is a natural cyclical part of life. We are supposed to feel stress. This whole process that you see in this chart, the polyvagal chart, this is natural. This is supposed to happen. This is the way God designed our bodies to react to danger. And so you can either go into fight or flight if you're kind of in that sympathetic activation, which starts as low as frustration, irritation, but can go up to anger and rage if you're in the fight mode. And it can start as low as worry or concern, anxiety, and up to fear and panic in flight mode. And if we get even more activated where we feel like we can't do anything, we can go up into freeze. I love to use the analogy of an antelope being chased by a lion for this, because it's the classic kind of fight or flight reaction. Most of the time, antelopes flight from lions because they can't fight them off. But imagining that, first of all, that antelope is in social engagement, the ventral vagal system is activated. It's just munching on grass, whatever, it's calm. But then as soon as that threat comes, that lion shows up, it moves into flight mode and it immediately goes into action. Its whole body just shifts. Its blood pressure goes up, heart rate increases. It's just all of these different processes change instantaneously. And so it runs. If it gets caught by the lion, it goes into freeze after maybe a few seconds because it realizes it can't do anything about this. It's stuck. And so on the off chance that this lion lets go or gets distracted, walks away for whatever reason, going into freeze mode saves the rest of the resources the antelope has left so it can flight again. So that's, I like to think of that as the reason we have a freeze response, is to hopefully maybe save everything we've got left for one last chance. But if we're in constant stress, where we're constantly in fight, flight, or freeze, this is where burnout happens. We are stuck in the middle all the time. And so we need to get into that deactivation curve where we're telling our body that it's safe now. The lion's gone. We actually ran away. We got safe. So we weren't caught by the lion. We're actually okay and secure. So we have to tell our bodies that somehow. And it's not enough to just tell it like, oh, you're fine, like just calm down. That's not enough. So I love this quote from the book Burnout. To be well is not to live in a state of perpetual safety and calm, but to move fluidly from a state of adversity, risk, adventure, or excitement back to safety and calm and out again. Stress is not bad for you. Being stuck is bad for you. So that stuck is what's causing this burnout, right? So it long-term, like even as we saw in that chart, short-term blood pressure goes up, heart rate goes up, all of these things. And over time, this can lead to overall high blood pressure chronically, heart disease, digestive related issues, because digestion shuts down when you're in fight or flight as well, because you're busy running away or fighting. So it inhibits growth. It can mess with reproduction. So getting pregnant can get hard, for example. Our immune system is down because it's not a priority when you're constantly running away from things or fighting things. And our ability to heal is even decreased. So I'm just going to kind of glaze over this, this self-defeating stress cycle. I think we're all pretty familiar with what this probably feels like. So it's just this constant, like, okay, trying to do so much in a little amount of time, and you're kind of just pushing yourself until you break down. You're like, okay, I can't even do this. But then maybe you get some rest and you do it all over again. But what we're not doing is addressing the stress itself in our bodies. So we're still stuck. And so this is just kind of this cycle. We're like, okay, like why does this keep happening? And it's just a cycle of dysregulation is kind of the key point of that. And oftentimes stressors in our environments, they might be chronic. There might be things that we can't control. It might be something at work, like a boss that you can't really, make go away, or you don't really have the option to quit, things like that. We're all going to have bills. We can't get rid of having to pay for things and keep ourselves alive that way. There's also social appropriateness that might make things difficult to deal with. So if somebody's, especially like in that situation with a boss who's like not nice, that's a chronic stressor, and it's not socially appropriate to be like, hey, like you're being mean to me, like stop. But there are different ways to deal with stressors that can be more healthy. But it's also sometimes feels much safer to be just ignoring that stressor, leaving it there. And so there's lots of reasons that we might kind of not be able to deal with a stressor, but we're going to look at dealing with the stress itself, because that part we can do something about. So again, the stress in our bodies includes our mind, body, and emotions. It's a whole system problem. So our minds have to be able to planfully problem solve. We have to basically work smarter, not harder. Instead of trying to put your effort over here, if it's not working that way, find a different way, find a new strategy. Positive reappraisal is kind of like looking on the bright side, but with still acknowledging that this is hard. So looking at things as an opportunity, being curious about like, okay, what could I get out of this, even though it's hard? Our bodies need to rest. So whatever that might look like, whether it's actually getting sleep or doing rejuvenating activities that are kind of gentle, going and getting a massage if you can, or at least taking care of illness as it comes up. things like that are very important to make sure that our bodies can handle the stress and recover from stress. And then emotions, if we can close these stress cycles, we can be more regulated emotionally. We can get relief from that emotional exhaustion that we can feel. So this is why it's so important to kind of close these stress cycles as they come up. So as a stressor comes up, stress comes. As a stressor comes up, stress comes again. So every time that stressor, either it goes away or it doesn't, but that stress in your body has to be resolved. We have to get to the end. So we're going to go through a few different ways that the book talks about to close those stress cycles. The first and most effective one is any kind of movement, physical activity. So this can be serious cardio like running or kayaking, biking, all of those kinds of things, but it can also be gentle things, walking, doing yoga, playing a sport, dance, or even just like getting up and shaking around. Like, it's amazing how much your body will recognize this as a signal that it's safe. Just getting up, moving, focusing on that movement as well can really help. And Tina, do you want to kind of expand on that a little bit more?
Yes. One of the things, just to give you an example of what I do, physical activity is the number one of all of these that I do. And how I do that is, if you think about what Annie was talking about in that stress cycle, closing the stress cycle, what I usually do at the end of the day is walk. I usually try to do it about sunset so I can get that natural melatonin in me. But when I am doing it, I'm focusing on what is happening in my body. And that's foreign to me, just so you know. That is the hardest part, because my achiever self ignored my body for years. And so for me, this physical activity, what made it key in the physical activity is I'm focused on what is happening in my body. Where is it tense? Where is it tight? When I'm walking, I'm actually looking and noticing that part and talking to it like it's a separate person, in a way of compassion. What do you know? What are you doing, chest? What are you doing, tummy? It's okay. I'm giving you permission to be there while I'm walking. And that is one of my biggest strategies. And again, the duration is only 20 to 60 minutes. And the physical activity doesn't have to be rigorous. You can do it in a rigorous way if you want, if that's the way, it helps you. You find what works best for you, and you do that.
The next one is breathing. I think a lot of us know how important this can be. And this is talking about that deep diaphragmatic breathing, anything that activates that diaphragm, because our diaphragms activate our vagus nerve, which is that cue for the parasympathetic nervous system to be like, okay, we're safe now, we're calm. And so that breathing can be just a pure breathing practice. It also goes along great with exercise. Hopefully we're breathing while we're exercising, but noticing that deep belly breathing and connecting with that breath. This is why so many spiritual practices involve breathing. And a lot of different religions have different breath things. And even in Christianity, sometimes in contemplative practices, it involves just being with the breath. And even the Holy Spirit is equated with breath as well. So we need this. Breathing can be so important. And it connects as well to the next couple slides. Laughing, and the next one is crying. Both of these can also activate that vagus nerve, that diaphragm movement. And it also just expresses emotion. Laughing, just getting that deep belly laugh, watching something on TV that makes you laugh, or playing a game that always makes you laugh. Anything that can get that deep belly laugh in, or crying, that deep, just full body cry, allowing for that. I know sometimes people have a lot of trouble getting themselves to cry, and so it can include watching like a sad movie or reading a sad story, or even just talking with somebody about something that is painful for you or sad. But one technique that I've mentioned to some clients is just focusing on the physical aspects of crying. So like, notice how it feels in your eyes or in your face or in your throat, wherever it's coming up. Notice those physical sensations, and that can often kind of help you actually get to the crying part so that it actually comes. But this one can be a tough one for people. There are a lot of, especially for men, they're taught not to cry. Boys don't cry. And so this can be a difficult one, but it can also be a really cathartic and freeing one that also does complete some of those stress cycles.
And to add into that, just to give you guys an example, Dean took me away this weekend for Valentine's, and we were watching a really serious movie. And there's a fun woman strength movie, Quentin Tarantino movie from way back when. But there's a scene in there where the woman is trying to wiggle her big toe. And so while I'm watching this movie, it's getting way too serious for me. I'm looking down at my toe and I'm trying to wiggle the big toe to see how did she do that? Because I can't do it without my second toe. Well, I didn't realize my husband's watching me. And he thought it was the most hilarious thing. He's like, what are you doing? And I'm like, how did she wiggle her big toe? And he laughed for so long. And we're laughing, but it's a serious movie and we're crying and we're laughing. And there's something so, like Annie said, cathartic in just the release of that, of just being silly. And we don't even realize we're being silly, you know? And to give an example of this picture here, this was when I was in Israel in last year. This is a real picture. And what Annie was saying, men and women coming together in this picture, in this scene, someone's wife, one of my friends who was supposed to go, her husband ended up going on and her mom died during this trip. We prayed and cried over her mother passing in this group together, and having men and women together like this in lament is so beautiful. And those tears that cry and those genuine tears, it's releasing toxins out of our body. There's actual toxins in our tears if you were to put it under a microscope and know what to look for.
And connecting that again, social interaction, positive social interactions, it can be as simple as the interactions you have at the grocery store with the cashier. If you just give, now it's harder to just smile now because we have masks on. So giving a friendly hello, like actually having a genuine interaction with somebody, that again is another way that our bodies understand that kind of interaction, if it feels safe with a safe person, our body understands that it's safe then. It's a way we pick up on this. We co-regulate with people all around us, whether we're noticing it or not. This goes with mirror neurons, all of that kind of mirroring that we do with people, but it's also just this presence. So I think we know that in the room with a client, like we can feel that person in the room with us. And so we do co-regulate. There's data to show that our heart rate synchronize, our breathing synchronizes. This is something that we do. So those moments where we're around people who are like, oh, okay, this is cool. Like I'm not in danger right now. And so those interactions can help complete those stress cycles as well, to make sure that our body knows it's like, oh, cool, this is safe. I think you were going to cover this one, Tina.
Oh, yes. You were just doing such a good job. I was just like, oh, I'm so happy. I forgot I was a teacher as well. So this affection, this one is really big. And I'm going to use the words in His Needs, Her Needs. Dr. Willard Hartley uses the word sexless affection. And I want to use that in particular with this particular exercise in closing the stress cycle, which is just this right here in particular is that nurturing, comfort, care. So you can get that with people, you can get that with animals. And what actually gives off, and I was reading, because I was actually looking up some of the research, you know, our wonderful oxytocin that gets released. It can also be released when we are cuddling animals. And so this is something that really does give you a sense of well-being. That oxytocin is linked to our serotonin and dopamine. And so when you're just doing that affection, not only is it releasing that oxytocin, but that oxytocin was also released with childbirth and nursing. So it has to do with that motherly care. And so when you're doing this, I'm going to tell you like one of the examples with my husband in particular, when he's having a really bad day, his love language is physical touch. He will actually lay on my lap, while we're watching a movie, and I will play with his hair and I will tickle his back. And that right there, he'll fall asleep on me. And that is something new for him because he didn't have that growing up. He didn't have any memories of that. When we went into How We Love and they say, do you have a memory of comfort? He didn't have that. So as a wife, I'm able to create that for him. Affection is so important as well in closing that stress cycle.
And to add to that, also like long hugs, like hugs until you actually both relax. And obviously in COVID, like sometimes there's a limited access to this, so this could be hard, but self-affection can work as well. It's probably not as effective, but it can work. And so just even focusing on affection or even spiritual connection can kind of achieve similar effects of just that calming, like, okay, I'm cared for, God loves me, the Spirit is here with me. That can have that relaxing effect as well. And so then the next one is creative expression. So this, I want to expand this. A lot of times I think a lot of people associate creativity with like artistic things in particular. You don't have to be talented at this at all. It doesn't have to be anything like that. But just creative expression of any kind where you're living out emotions in some way. So whether that's painting, music, theater, sculpting, playing music, singing, coloring, or writing. Writing in particular is one that's fairly accessible. Again, you don't have to be good at it, but even just writing a short story or a poem or something that just creates a place in your mind, even like writing about your safe place, can be a creative expression. Something, again, that's a way that our bodies pour out what's going on inside so that it knows, like, okay, like, we're safe, I'm processing what has happened. And it can be specifically about a stressor, or it can be more general about just human experience or your life. It doesn't necessarily have to be like, I'm going to write about the stressor. I'm going to write a short story about how my boss was mean to me. I love that I keep using boss examples when Tina is my boss.
Yeah, why is that, Miss Annie?
It's just one I keep hearing as an example. Definitely not about you.
Just kidding. And just to kind of add, to give an example to for you guys, I love to journal, but the other one is coloring. I have a coloring book that is all mandalas, and I even have this one, like Letting It Be. Oh, nice. Right, and I'll take one of these. And all I do is if I'm feeling sad, this works great when I'm sad. I'll put on a sad movie. I get my mandala and I just put it on a clipboard and I'm coloring while I'm watching the movie. And again, it gives me that release, that cathartic release. I don't even have to think about what's making me sad. I'm just focusing on my body. I'm just focusing on what I'm feeling in my body, coloring and doing that. And again, like Annie said, I'm just leaning into it. And I'm not artistic. I'm a mathematician. That's why I need to have lines so I can stay in the colors. But with that said, I'm still able to give that creative expression.
So there's some blocks to recovery. And so this connects to kind of what I was saying in the intro. Sometimes this is systemic, societal blocks. The book Burnout talks a lot about this idea of human giver syndrome. So I'll explain it a little bit more on the next slide, but it's just kind of something that we're probably all very familiar with because we're in this profession. We give more than we think we deserve to get from people. So we give everything because we think that that's what we're supposed to do. So this is how the book describes it. The contagious belief that you have a moral obligation to give every drop of your humanity in support of others, no matter the cost to you. So they structure this as kind of, there are human beings and human givers. Our society is structured in this way that some people give and some people get to just exist. Human givers must sacrifice everything. The idea is that self-care is selfish. Like, you're not allowed to do that. You're supposed to be giving everything away. The benefit you give to the world is only through what you can give to others. Whereas human beings are seen as benefiting the world simply by existing. And the ideal is not that everyone would be human beings, because we can't all be human beings. Like, the system would break down. The ideal is that everyone would be in this balance of a healthy version of this human giver model and be able to mutually give and receive as we each need, so that we can all come together in harmony with each other, not just giving, not just taking. The system we have now it's a rigged game. Some of us win and some of us lose. But we can't all just win. We have to change the game. We have to stop playing the game. We're all complicit in this current system. We're all still playing it a lot of the time. And so the awareness of how it works and choosing to not play this burnout game is what's going to break that down for all of us.
Yeah. And there's a lot of different reasons where we can fall into this human giver syndrome. And I can tell you, even for me, it's cultural. And so I was taught that this is what you're supposed to do at the expense of yourself. And that, so, you know, it's one of those things that if you feel like you can relate to these things, just think about where that came from and where do you get depleted in this? Where can you not say no? This next one, this is the other block. And that's where we have expectations and assumptions about things. And it can really get us to lose our way, because if we can't really truly, we are not fully in control of the next step. We really are not, no matter how well we plan things. And so if we have too high of an expectation on how something should look or should be, we actually won't be able to really experience the beauty of the messy reality that we really live in. And so this can actually rob us. And then the assumptions, when this is something that I've seen very common in Christians, is even saying, if it's not going the way I want it to, or I think it should, am I doing something wrong? Am I not enough? Am I not praying enough? Am I, you know, so there's all these blocks where even can really affect their relationship with God in what they expect, either how God should show up for them or how God should show up in the world and in relationships with them. So it really determines our level of frustration, is that expectation and assumptions.
Yeah, our brains are specifically designed with what the Burnout book they call the monitor, that evaluates our progress. And it's kind of exactly like this image on this slide. If our brain is expecting that this, oh, it's going to be a straight shot, easy peasy, but then it encounters this squiggly line instead, it's going to be like, what? Why? I don't like this. Things are bad. What's going on? So that increases that stress response. It's like, okay, like, shoot, like, what am I going to do? I'm failing. Everything's wrong. And so if you can go to the next slide too, this connects to this next block, this idea of getting stuck in one gear. So as our brain is kind of trying to get over these stressors, trying to get over these humps, it's sometimes we get stuck. It's kind of like the classic, like, definition of insanity, I think, is doing the same thing over and over again and still expecting it to work. If we keep trying the same things and we're getting stuck in that one gear of trying it the same way over and over and over again, we get stuck in that one gear and it's just not going to work. We're not designed to stay in one gear. We're designed to oscillate, to move back and forth from these states, like we talked about earlier. We're supposed to be going back and forth between effort and rest, between connection and autonomy. We're not always going to be in affection. Like, we can't always be hugging each other. We have to be, doing other stuff as well. And sometimes we are on our own. And from purpose to searching, like, we can't always be filled with a sense of purpose and meaning. We're going to go through periods where we're really connected to our something bigger, but then they're going to go through times where we're less connected, where we're searching for, like, okay, well, how do I reconnect to that? What am I doing here? What do I need? And so if we expect that it's going to be, oh, like, once I get to rest and, like, balance, everything will be great from now on, that straight line, that's not going to happen. We are in those squiggles. And so we're going to go back and forth, and we're going to connect, and we're going to be autonomous, and we're going to be interdependent in moments as well. So if your brain is expecting that, like, if I try hard enough, I'll have it all figured out and everything will be great all the time, you're going to be constantly frustrated, and you're going to be constantly approaching burnout.
Absolutely. And that's one of the things. We're now going into our third phase, or fourth phase. And just knowing that stress cycle, knowing that even though we're completing our stress cycle, that we have these blocks. So be aware of these blocks while we're closing that stress cycle. Our next section is going to be now burnout prevention techniques. Now we want to try to get ahead of it before we actually get to burnout. And how do we go about doing that? The first and easiest one is working on completing that stress cycle and all those activities that we shared.
And then the next part is healing that human giver syndrome. So this is obviously a long process. This is not something we can just be like, oh, I just won't be a human giver anymore. But part of this is connecting to something bigger than yourself. If you have a purpose and a meaning that is very fulfilling to you, that can help you have perspective so that you're not always just emptying yourself. You're connecting to that something bigger that fuels you and connects you to something larger than yourself. We are placed on this earth to be more than just fulfilling the needs of others. That is a lie, that we are just here to serve others. We are here to exist with each other. Even thinking about like the Garden of Eden, God didn't like make it hard work from the beginning. Like, sure, like there was stuff to do, like Adam had to name the animals and all this stuff, but it was about existing together. And so that is what we're here for. We're here to create, to have fun, to let life be messy. This is going to be back and forth, and it doesn't have to be a bad thing that we're going through stress. We're designed for it. Our bodies are literally designed to handle stress. We're just not designed to stay in it 100% of the time. So that's why we have to make this space for something that's just for you, things that fill you back up. So not only connecting to that something bigger, but also just filling back up, allowing rest. Create space for you to enjoy stuff that you love. Whether that's, I love this picture of just like sitting out in nature. If that does it for you, great. If it's cooking or spending time with friends can also be this, but it's, you know, space that's intentionally for your benefit. So be careful with that. Even if you're extroverted, like you be careful about gathering, because it can also just be too easy to fall back into that human giving. So ask for a time, a gathering together that's just for you. That's okay to do. Retraining our brains that the world will still function even if we're not doing everything. If we don't say yes to everything, it'll be okay. We have to learn how to say no. And then also being alone with yourself and learning to enjoy that. That is a practice as well. It takes time to do that. And there is a difference between solitude and feeling alone. Loneliness can come up in solitude, but loneliness can come up when you're around people too. So that's an important distinction, I think, to remember.
Yes. And one of the big preventative measures is rest and sleep. We so discount this. This is one thing that tends to go so quickly. Our sleep can be disturbed with so many things. It can be disturbed with stress, everything. But when we're getting it, when we're getting the rest, even in between, activities, if we're going like into Zoom all day long and then we go home and say we put some dishes in the dishwasher and then we go and we now are doing progress notes, we are changing it up, and that is still resting our brain to shift into something different. Rest and sleep will increase our health, it'll increase our productivity, and it will help us avoid burnout. There are some people that go, Tina, you're like Tigger, you bounce everywhere. What is your secret? To be honest, part of it is still unhealthiness. I am getting better every day. Another one, though, is I sleep 8 to 9 hours a night. I go to bed at 9 o'clock, guys. My brain starts to shut down at 7 p.m. And I, like clockwork, will wake up at 6 a.m. every morning wide awake. So it's one of those things that take something through all these preventative measures, whatever it is, and do it well, and you will feel a difference.
Yeah, I think the sleep and the rest. Rest is a lot like circuit training. Like if you're working out different muscle groups, you have to do a different muscle group to let that one rest before you go back and do it again. So the same way we can bounce around to different activities, different ways that our brain is functioning so that it can rest in between. And so then we're going to talk about the monitor a little bit more. So this functions better when we have rest, first of all, when our brain is well rested, when it's gotten sleep, especially that consistent sleep like Tina's talking about. Our brains can do expectations a lot better. We're not like completely out of touch with reality. We can be grounded and rational. So this monitor, there's a fancier name for it that I haven't bothered to memorize yet, but this is basically the function in our brain that, like I said, is like, okay, this is where I am. This is where I want to go. How much effort is it taking me to get there? Is that what I expected or not? And so that difference, that distance between now and the goal, if it's too big, our brain might give up or it might be too stressed out. So this is why it's sometimes we have to do this planful problem solving. That's really hard for me to say. So sometimes this is basically, working smarter, not harder, and doing things in a way that is kind of creative sometimes. It's not just like, okay, I'm gonna, just brute force this. The example in the book they talk about is, instead of like leaving for work and not checking the traffic, if traffic might be an issue, if there might be an accident or something, use your GPS. That's planful problem solving. Like, you're just using tools that you have to make sure that you can find a different route if you need to. The next one is positive reappraisal. This is acknowledging that there is discomfort, there's something that's not pleasant to do, and looking for the opportunities within that discomfort. So again, let's use a traffic example. If you're like sitting behind an accident and you're like, okay, this is really, stressing me out, I'm late for things. What else can you practice in that moment? What else can you adjust in life? Like, use that as an opportunity to make sure that this stress is still worthwhile. If this stress is worthwhile, your brain will be like, okay, this is building towards something. So traffic is probably a bad example for that. But if you're like, I remember writing my comprehensive exam and I was feeling so defeated by it. And I was like, okay, I think this is garbage by now. Like, I can't even read it straight. But then I remembered why I'm doing this. And this was during COVID. I was like, what is the point? Like, I don't have energy. Like, how am I supposed to finish this? But I remembered why I'm doing this, why I want to write my comps so that I can be a therapist, so that I can help people. And remembering that helped my brain shift that monitor into like, okay, yeah, this is supposed to be hard. So, okay. And similarly, redefining winning. Again, if we just expect that straight line and it's easy, we're going to be frustrated. If we know that it's going to be squiggly lines and ups and downs, we can define winning as continuing through those squiggly lines. We don't have to like, oh, I'm going to finish like 15,000 things on my to-do list today. Like, no, like that's not winning. That's impossible. And so maybe doing 3 items on your to-do list is more rational and more reasonable. So maybe that is winning for today.
And as we're going into our rest and peacefulness, we're going to start hearing more of our parts showing up. And sometimes we have accidentally tried to drown out these parts, escape these parts, reject these parts, even judge these parts. And one of the, and this you can kind of, if you guys are in internal family systems, you'll see that that's part of this. In the Burnout book, she also talks about other ones, and these are the ones that I see most common in the parts work that I do with my clients. And one of them is that inner critic, and that is one that's very polarized, and it's either blame self or blame others, that inner part, and then that toxic perfectionist that is, and perfectionism in itself isn't bad. It's when it's maladaptive, when it's an irrational perfectionism where we feel we have to be perfect, and we go, both of those are very polarized, all or nothing type of experiential parts, but they're not bad. They're there for a reason. You just have to figure out, listen to them. And then even there's the saboteur, and the saboteur is the one that the inner critic and the toxic perfectionist are trying to help us get acceptance in the world, whether it's image, whether it's trying to get us to gain acceptance. The saboteur is the one that tends to sabotage those pieces of us that are trying to strive or perform. They're the parts that say, you're not going to get this no matter how much you try, or those pieces. And then there's this rebellious teenager that sometimes say, oh, forget it, and then go and do things that the inner critic and the toxic perfectionist have spent overtime to try to prevent you from misbehaving. And that rebel teenager can go boop and mess it up just like that. And then there's a distressed child inside of us in some way, shape, or form. All of these parts, these are the parts that go and get stuck in your body. These are the parts that are talking in your body. The importance of knowing all of this in a nutshell is the importance of self-compassion, nurture, comfort, and care. That is our key relationship with these parts. Just like IFS says, all parts are welcome and there are no bad parts. Same here. We just have to understand why they exist and why they have the roles that they do. Annie, do you have anything you want to add here?
No, I think that was great. And I think that, that importance of connection, self-compassion is that bridge between ourselves and the rest of the world. I know Kristen Neff goes through the different parts of self-compassion, understanding this is a moment of suffering. understanding that everyone goes through times of suffering. This is a universal experience, and then finding a way to be kind to yourself. And then that can extend to others as well. So connection to other people is a human need. Just like eating food is a human need, we need connection. We are designed for it. I know we're running low on time, so I'm gonna kind of go over this very quickly. But humanity needs that connection for so many different reasons. Part of it is that co-regulation I was talking about before, like our bodies are designed to help each other calm back down. All of those different ways of completing stress cycles involving other people, those can be super important. But this also helps us grow. It helps give us perspective from outside that mirrors back to us the good things about ourselves and maybe the areas of growth that we have too. So that's what's so important about connection in a very brief way. If you go to the next slide as well. And so this is, again, like, I'm gonna keep going back to this idea of oscillating back and forth. So we need to connect to others, and we also need to be individually connected as well. So we need to be connected to ourselves to recognize, am I in stress right now, or am I out of a stress cycle? Like recognizing your own cycles to complete those, and then seek who you are as an individual person as well as in your community. What are your connections? What is your role in the communities that you exist in? Know what you want. What is your drive? What desires do you have? Can those all align together? Have life align with something bigger than yourself. So having a bigger picture of what you're driving, what is driving you, and what you're going towards, what fills you up, like all of these things can be working together. It doesn't have to be like, I'm going to give everything for some other cause. It's like, no, how do I connect to a cause that fills me up so much that I can't help but keep going?
And finding your meaning. Finding the meaning is the secret to just finding that peace. And those 3 bullet points there, it's the spiritual meaning. God's calling for your life. Where do you feel, God's will is in for your life? Legacy. Are you leaving your mark in this world? What do you want to leave your mark? How do you want to leave this world in a better place because you existed in it? And purpose. Purpose can be collective. Meaning can be personal. But that purpose, we can go in, and it's what is driving us, what keeps us getting up in the morning, what makes us go.
And finally, I want to end with this idea of joy. Joy is a radical act. This is not something that we always do very well. Especially, it's what, a lack of joy is often what drives burnout as well. Like we just have to keep achieving, keep doing, and we don't stop to enjoy, to be grateful, to have that self-compassion, to connect to those spiritual practices. Celebrating yourself, your own accomplishments, your own growth over time, that can be joyful. And celebrating with others, similar to that idea of laughing and crying, like joy and celebration, those are communal activities as well, to show that we did it, we've been doing it, we're connected, we're still here. How great is that? And I was actually reading, it was funny, Barbara mentioned Peter Levine has a self-holding exercise, but I have a quote from him that I read from a blog. Says that joy is an experience of expansion, whereas fear is one of deep contraction. Cultivating joy is an important component of resilience as it increases our capacity to face difficulties. He says, the more we increase this capacity, the less overwhelming emotions will be. So the more that we can practice this joy, the more we can handle. It's not that this is another item on our to-do list. This is more of a lifestyle shift of being grateful and celebrating that joy, not just celebrating accomplishment or what we can do or what we have done for others. Celebrating life, finding that spiritual connection to the greater whole of humanity, the whole of Christ in creation. These are the things that fill us back up. So yeah, he says, or this blog post I was reading says, when we continue to cultivate joy, we gain the ability to feel the overwhelm without becoming overwhelmed ourselves.
Yes. Absolutely. And this, guys, this is the importance of, even if you think about it, every single one of the prevention techniques we use, even sleep, if we want to sleep here, it can be met here in community with one another, individually and collectively. Why this organization is great is not because of what we do. It's because of who we are with each other in it. That's what makes the difference. I know that we are out of time, but we are going to have another Burnout Part 2 next month, which will be in breakout sessions that we're actually going to go into some of these and dive a little bit deeper in with each other. So I just, Annie, did we have any questions that we want to make sure we address before it ends?
Abel had shared about hugging yourself for the affection piece. And so, yeah, like self-hug can work. Barbara shared that, yeah, Peter Levine has a self-holding exercise for this. So that is out there as well. But yeah, that was the only question that I saw come through. If you guys have questions still, I'll stay on for a few more minutes to gather those so that we can maybe include them in the next training. So go ahead and throw them either in the chat or in the Q&A feature. But yeah.
Awesome.
Deep diving.
And these are the 3 books that mostly was the burnout that Annie and I were going through. But I added these 2. This one, Making Work Human, is actually in the middle of what I'm preparing. I don't know if you guys have heard of 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. We'll be doing that actually in April together as a group. And Making Work Human is a beautiful thing because it also is going into how do we collectively be there for one another and give each other permission to feel.
I love that Permission to Feel book. It's fantastic. I have only like heard about it. I haven't read the whole thing, but like the concepts are just fantastic.
Yeah, definitely. And can I close this in prayer? God, thank you for our time today. Thank you for just keeping us together in learning together and building one another up. And God, thank you just for your refreshing and healing nature of who you are. As we go into Ash Wednesday, wherever we have been, wherever our journey has taken us, any regrets we have made, any pains we've carried, any mistakes we've made, may today be an opportunity for a fresh start. This is grace. Today, Ash Wednesday. Then Jesus said to them all, whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves and take up their cross daily and follow me. For whoever wants to save their life will lose it, but whoever loses their life for me will save it. God, thank you for who you are, and thank you for giving us the gift of love through you for each other. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. Thank you, everybody, for coming.